yoga, which, yeah, you would think I might be, but I don't. I really see that as your area of expertise. So I think we're live. I think we're live on Tuesday Tips.
I think we are.
So everybody who is on watching Tuesday Tips, you might notice, I am not alone. I've got Dr. Vincent Pedre here. I'm so excited to have him here. He's one of our awesome faculty in the Advanced Nutrition for Health Coaches course. And he's going to be talking to us today about gut health. And why this is so great is, I don't know if this is true of doctors, Dr. Pedre, but a lot of health coaches, we end up coming into health coaching because we have our own health challenges. And we may or may not have been able to figure them out. So we're looking for a way to do so. And I know for myself, when I started as a health coach, and I'm going to introduce Dr. Pedre officially in a moment, but when I started, one of the things that propelled me to health coaching was stomach problems. I had terrible IBS, it was said at the time. And I remember going to see a gastroenterologist, a lovely man, I'm sure with excellent intentions, but basically said, like, here's a prescription for Zelnorm, you have IBS, you're going to need to take this for the rest of your life. And I remember being like, it was like it hit me in the face. I was shocked. I'm like, I have to take a pill for the rest of my life. I don't understand. So for those of you who are also suffering with tummy troubles, it can be really painful. So I'm super happy to have Dr. Pedre here. Like I said, he's a faculty in Advanced Nutrition for Health Coaches. He teaches our digestive health protocol. But in case you don't know Dr. Pedre, he is certified in functional medicine, in medical acupuncture, which is very cool. He's a yoga expert. He's known in the wellness community as the bridge. Because he bridges Eastern and Western methodologies, which is so needed, I think, in this day and age. He's a board certified internist. He's the author of a book that you can see there in the video called Happy Gut. And in that book, you can learn about a program he created called Gut Care. And
I also demonstrate kind of like Vanna White.
I was going to say, it's very Vanna of you. The other thing is, you may have seen Dr. Pedre. He's been all over the television on shows like Dr. Oz and Good Morning America. If you're in New York City, you may or may not be lucky enough to get into his private practice where he is the medical.
There's a waiting list now.
Yeah. I can only imagine people must be pounding down your door. So,
yep.
Yeah, so I'd love to get started to talk about gut health because we have about 30 minutes today. Sometimes when I'm alone, I can go on and on. But today's a little shorter because we're accommodating schedules. So maybe before we talk about gut health and some of your recommendations, you can share a little bit just about how you decided to, become a doctor, yes, but what's interesting is deciding to bridge the Western and Eastern methodologies and what drove you to do that.
I think this is what I realized along the way was that medicine didn't have all the answers. And it came from a place of intuition. But it also came from a place of having grown up with a dad that had like his lineup of supplements that he was taking. But even when I was in my early teens, he had done food sensitivity tests and figured out what foods he could eat and what foods he couldn't eat. And he was really trying, it's kind of funny because he wasn't a doctor, he was an engineer. And he was really trying to educate us on what was the right thing to eat. So at one point we had a list. I don't know if anybody else has had this, but we had a list on our refrigerator, a paper, and it had a line in the middle. And on one side were all the foods that you should eat. And then on the other side was a skull and crossbones with all the foods that we shouldn't be eating. And you can imagine some of the things that might have fallen into that category, like fast food establishments, pizza. And as a child, I think I looked at it sort of with humor. You know, we kind of made fun of it as, you know, there's our dad, like doing this stuff. But as an adult, I realized that I was assimilating all of this, and it was influencing me at a level, even when I would make fun of it, at some level, it was sinking in that maybe there's another way to eat. And it came from, you know, maybe there was an intuition. I like to think I come from a lineage of healers. My grandfather was a doctor in Cuba. I never met him because he didn't leave after the revolution. And unfortunately, he died on the other side before I could meet him. But turns out, and I didn't know this growing up, that he was very interested in natural medicine. And he wasn't very pro prescribing medications. And he was a country doctor. Like, I mean, and when I say country doctor, I mean, he would go see his patients on horseback. That's how country he was. And he had grown up in a big plantation in the center of Cuba, like out, not in Havana, like out in the middle of the countryside. And I think it was in my lineage to follow this trajectory, but also my intuition as for everyone. And we're always leading our patients to find their wisdom, their internal wisdom. And it was my internal wisdom that said, there is more to this story than what I am being taught in medical school or even in my residency training. There's much more out there that can help people heal. And I always felt that there's a power to the human body to heal itself if it's just given the right formula. You know, if you put the right input in, the thing that has become so complicated, and we can get to talking about gluten or food sensitivities, is that we live in a world that you don't know when you turn the corner if something that looks really enticing could be toxic to you or toxic to your system, or could be harboring pesticides or is inflammatory. Like, I wish, and I'm gluten-free, and I also my body template, my blueprint. This is just the way I was made to live until I started changing my diet. And I realized that it wasn't that way, that you don't have to live that way. And that's why I'm so passionate about this, because one of my mission is to help people live happier, healthier lives. And especially through realizing that the key to health is through the gut.
Why is this? I mean, it's like one would just assume, yeah, that's cool. If someone doesn't, why would that?
Just think about it. The gut is our biggest inside-outside world. So the reason the gut is so key and integral to health is because, first, it's your contact, your biggest contact with the outside world. Everything that comes through your mouth has to go through your gut. And the small intestine is 20 feet long, but it's the surface area of a tennis court. That is huge. That is a really, really huge surface area to come into contact with this outside world. And what if the outside world has been exposed to antibiotics, like a lot of factory farm meats are, or it's been exposed to pesticides? One of the most commonly used pesticides is Roundup, which has glyphosate. And glyphosate is an antibiotic. It's an antimicrobial molecule. So it comes in and it starts to destroy your gut flora. And over time, you'll develop leaky gut as a result of that. And along the gut lining, all of that those 20 feet plus another 5 to 6 feet of the colon is your immune system. 70% of your immune system just sitting there. It's like a barrack. It's just waiting, seeing what's coming in and asking the question, is this okay or is this not okay? And if you develop leaky gut syndrome, a lot of people in our modern society. If you've been on antibiotics, if you have a dysbiosis, an imbalance between good and bad bugs in the gut, so if you have yeast overgrowth, or if you've been under stress, you can get leaky gut syndrome and dysbiosis just from being under stress. And who is not under constant stress in our society? And then medications, like ones that people take every day that are over the counter, like Advil, ibuprofen, that increases the permeability of the gut. So we are set up for walking around with leaky gut syndrome. And we know that about 75 million Americans suffer from some form of gut distress on a daily basis. 20% of people have heartburn or acid reflux at least once a week. And out of those 70%, I don't know exactly, but I kind of, conjecture that there's probably like 90% of them have some element of leaky gut syndrome that is causing their symptoms. And the thing that I've seen, so this is really key. One of the things that I see in my practice is that not every symptom that a person has to be gut related to still be rooted in their gut health. So for example, fatigue, asthma, allergies, fibromyalgia, we know all of these conditions have a base in the gut. So if you start to heal the gut and you start to transform the person's gut health, and you start seeing that other things start to improve. Mental fog, so even the brain-gut connection, the ability to form memory is partly dependent on having a healthy microbiome that produces butyrate that then goes to your brain and has epigenetic effects. So it's controlling, so your microbiome through the foods that you're eating is controlling the way that you're able to form memory and your neuroplasticity. Like think about how important is that? Like that really powerful connection. And things that don't seem to be related to the gut are rooted in gut health. And for anybody who has any chronic condition, if you only treat the condition and you ignore starting with the base, which is the gut, which comes back to, guess what? Diet. Our greatest source of potential poison is at the end of our fork, but at the same time, it's also our greatest potential for healing.
Well, I love that because, hold on one second. I'm just going to mute you for 1 sec if I can. I think we've got a little echo. Okay, so what I love about that is that you're mentioning that diet is such a huge key to healing the gut. And, eating healthy or taking gluten out of your diet, if that's something that you need to do, or changing your diet anyway, means changing your habits. That's hard to do. And one of the reasons why we were so excited to have you on Advanced Nutrition for Health Coaches is that as a health coach, you can kind of go down the rabbit hole of, I'm not a doctor, so how am I going to help a potential client heal their gut? How am I going to heal my own gut? But how am I going to help a potential client? They're going to be paying me money, and what I can't do what a doctor can do. And what I'm hearing from you is that actually changes in the diet can be profoundly effective when it comes to healing leaky gut. And that's really exciting news for those of us who are health coaches. Also, I wanted to ask real quickly, what is the microbiome for those who've never heard that phrase or don't know what it is?
Carey, the microbiome is this group of bugs, let's say, microscopic organisms that live on our body and in our body. So we have multiple microbiomes. So you have a microbiome that's on the palm of your hand that's different from the microbiome that's inside your mouth, that's slightly different in composition from the microbiome that's inside your nose, your sinuses, your airway, and different from the microbiome, which is the one that we most talk about, which is the gut microbiome. And the reason for that is because the majority of the bacteria that live in us are actually inside the gut, particularly in the large intestine. So we have about 100 trillion of these microorganisms, and it can be a combination, mostly bacteria, but also yeast, parasites. I mean, don't want to get gross, but we're basically a host to these single cellular organisms, right, that outnumber our cells 10 to 1. And their DNA outnumbers our own DNA 100 to 1. So we're actually more microbe than we are human when you come to think of it. It's kind of crazy. But I also like to think of this microbiome that we have inside of us. And I talk a lot about the gut as being an internal garden, right? So what do you do to your garden? You tend to your garden. You de-weed the garden. If you don't pay attention to the garden, what happens to it? It goes, boom, it goes into disarray. So this internal garden can have, a bunch of different characters in there. And just to understand, because people take probiotics, and probiotics are helpful, and I use them in my practice. But a probiotic might have anywhere between a couple of species to 8 to 10 different species of bacteria, right, that are in there. But each individual has anywhere between 400 and 600 species that are unique to them. And the types of species that predominate change depending on where you are in the world. So the makeup will have slight differences if you look at the microbiome of someone in Asia versus someone in Africa versus someone in Europe versus someone in the US. So the makeup of the microbiome becomes sort of influenced by our environment, by the types of foods we eat, and then of course in our modern world, the overexposure to antibiotics. And now, unfortunately, because of that, we're getting what we call these superbugs, these antibiotic resistant bugs that the World Health Organization just 2 months ago issued a warning about this. And the main reason is over prescribing of antibiotics, but possibly another reason is that outside of America, in countries in Asia, in Central America, South America, you can buy an antibiotic just by going to the pharmacy. You don't need to see a doctor. It's over the counter. And that is really scary because we don't really need so many antibiotics. Not that antibiotics are not life-saving, but most infections that people have are viral. Most colds are caused by viruses. And again, if you're taking care of your health from the perspective of really eating what's right for your body, what's healthy, what is alive, what is free of pesticides, then your immune system can take care of an infection like a virus. And antibiotics are needed when they're needed. And I like what you said. I was thinking as you were talking about what is the role of a health coach. And I think just as I see my patients over the years, transformation doesn't happen in one single visit. Transformation happens over a series of singular events over time. And part of what we do as health practitioners and what a health coach can do is to be there, to be the sounding board, and to hold the person's hand and help them get to those singular moments of insight where suddenly click, something makes sense. Like, wow, every time I'm upset, I reach into the candy jar. And I was doing this without thinking, like the candy's already in my mouth before I even realize what I'm doing. Like, if you can help a person realize that, that can have such a dramatic effect on the trajectory of where their health goes in the future. So what I see is that people's health journeys are built upon these very important moments, these aha moments. I know you like those aha moments. So we're helping people arrive to their aha moments. And in between, where they're not getting to that moment, we're holding space for whatever it is that they need help with. And even if it's just to be there as a sounding board to get them to the next step, because maybe they needed 2 steps before they finally get to the next aha moment where they realize, like, wow, I was eating too much sugar and I didn't realize that there was sugar in the coffee I was drinking that I was picking up at Dunkin' Donuts or wherever it may be, or that I didn't realize that I was allowing gluten in when I was supposed to be on a gluten-free diet. And part of the reason we need health coaches is because these moments, you can't expect a person in this crazy, busy world where people are professionals, they're working hard, to get it all in one visit. They get it over time and they get better at it. It's almost like they need to go out and practice and then make some mistakes. And then you just keep reorienting them. You just keep putting them back on course, back on course, back on course. Each time refining the course. And there's so much can be done by a health coach that as a practitioner, as a physician, that I don't have the time to be meeting with a person at that level of frequency to help them. So the health coach becomes the extension of the health practitioner and helping bridge, there it is. They're also a bridge. They bridge that gap between, they humanize what we tell them. Because it could be that I have a patient and I tell them, you have to go on a gluten-free diet. And they may not want to tell me because they want to seem cool and that they're collected and they want to be usually patients want to be A students, so they want to be A students. They can go to the health coach and say, I'm freaking out. Like, I don't know how to do gluten-free. Like, what am I going to eat? And then the health coach can walk them through, and start a sequential gluten elimination. And you can always, you have the time to meet the person where they're at and then take them from where they're at to where they want to go, and help them on those health goals.
Yeah, that is that's a beautiful explanation of what it is a health coach does. My husband, as I was talking with him about health coaching, he said something that I thought was great. He said, so the doctor plans out the work and then the health coach works the plan. And that's how it goes together. And I was like, well, that's perfectly said. So that when you, tell someone what they need to do that requires a serious lifestyle change, the health coach can take over. It's our absurd, we call it our magnificent obsession, or the absurd question that we're going after is going like, how can we get, everyone has a doctor, how can we get everyone a health coach to work with the doctor so that everyone can get better faster? Because I don't know, it seems like people are not getting better, they might be getting sicker. And it's scary a little bit.
Really scary. And I think that part of it is mired in our adulterated food system with so many chemicals and so much sugar. People are eating way too much sugar. They're getting exposed to too many chemicals. We don't know which foods are genetically modified because they don't have to be labeled as such. And even if a food is not labeled genetically modified, for example, like wheat, which is not a genetically modified crop, it could still be sprayed with a pesticide that is used on genetically modified crop just as a matter of convenience for harvesting wheat. So you could be exposed through any of a number of means to these pesticides, herbicides that get into our system. I mean, they found it in the bloodstream of pregnant women. That's pretty scary. What does it then do? What type of genetic imprinting does it do to the unborn fetus? And then the chemicals that we are exposed to in the air, the fumes, the diesel exhaust, the ground level ozone, all of this stuff adds up. So I think that's why people are getting sicker and people are spending more time indoors, not getting out as much, So that's another big factor, is that sitting is becoming the new smoking. Everybody's indoors on their smartphones and spending a lot of time. I mean, one struggle I have is getting patients off of Dr. Google and just kind of just live life. Like, don't bury yourself in research. They don't realize how taxing that is, but they want to know. And I know that's important to know what's going on with you. But at some point, it's important to just be present, to live, to be in the rhythm of life. And I think Europeans have a better concept of that than we do here in America. And I traveled to Cuba just in February. And what was really remarkable to me is, when you first arrive there and you realize everything they're lacking, and wow, I'm in a different world now. Like, things are not done the same way here. And people have to stand in lines, and you stand in line for up to an hour. And you think of all the inefficiencies, and the first thing you feel is how different it is from the US and what's missing. But then you start to know the people, and you start feeling the richness in their soul, and how even within the lack, they are so much richer than we are in presence, in connectedness with each other, in the way that they kind of back each other up. And by the time I left there, I still felt, we are so lucky. We are so lucky for everything we have and all the advances in technology. But at the same time, after 7 days of an internet and smartphone detox, where I was disconnected from everything, there was more social and less media, let's put it that way. And I realized, how lucky are they to be in the place that they are right now, because we're lost in our world. And when I came back to New York, funny thing is, I felt a little bit in culture shock for about a few days, overwhelmed with the lights and the noise and the people and all the electronics. And it was strange. Like, I was in culture shock getting to Cuba, and I was also in culture shock coming back to the US. But then really appreciating that around the corner from me is a Target, which is full of so much stuff. And you go into a store in Cuba, and maybe it has what could be on one shelf in Target, and that's it. And how lucky we are. But the important message here is, as we become more technological and more involved and I love Facebook because it does connect people, but I also think we need to get out there and, just have a tech break. I'm going to talk about this as part of my gut program. And I think it's essential to any program is having a technology break. Like, be present with your family members. Like, the worst thing is to see a group of parents and their kids, and everybody's looking down at their smartphone at the table, and no one's talking to each other. Like, let's talk to each other. Let's socialize.
Well, yeah. And speaking of talking and being together and having a little bit of a technology detox, I'm excited that we're going to get to see you at HCI Live May 18th through the 20th. This is sort of a sneak peek like I'm sharing a secret that Dr. Pedre is going to be there speaking at the event. And the reason, we could certainly not do live events. We don't have to. We're primarily online training. But the reason that we do is for exactly what you just said, that we have to get off our computers at times, get together in a room with people, and be present to who we are, to who we're becoming, to what is, to what's possible. And that makes a huge difference in the quality of our life experience every day. And when I think about digestion and technology, my God, just the amount of information that we're consuming on a regular basis. If you think about, we consume food, we're also consuming information, and the anxiety level around that, I think we just live with as normal. When we get away from it, it's really, I think, like you experienced in Cuba, like, oh my gosh, I actually could just be here without checking my phone and checking the computer. So before we complete, because I know we have to complete in just a couple of minutes, I would love to share just a couple tips from your gut health protocol and your book and all of, I mean, I know you have so much to share, but let's just quickly talk about two things that I think are really important. One is gluten, because that is a big deal. And there are a lot of people who may be wondering, well, should I not eat it? Should I eat it? What's the big deal? Why is it a problem? And then the second one is why slowing down before eating is actually a really powerful tool that can change your digestion. So I'd just love if you could share briefly about those two things.
Do you have another 30 minutes?
We got another 3 days. No, I wish.
Oh, so much to talk about with gluten. I mean, just starting with the fact that the gluten protein is irritating to the gut. It increases the permeability of the gut. So it's one of the factors that causes leaky gut syndrome. And we found in a study that was done several years ago, they were looking at fish, the digestive system of fish, and found that the pesticide, so the pesticide that causes, that's used on the wheat plant, glyphosate, causes changes in the digestive lining of the fish that are similar to celiac disease. So pretty scary. And the other interesting thing is to wonder, well, if I don't feel that I have a problem when I eat gluten, do I have a gluten problem? And there was another study where they looked at 3 groups: patients with celiac disease, patients that had non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and normal patients that didn't have any issues with gluten. They looked at whether it increased gut permeability. And what they found was that there was an increase in gut permeability in, yes, the celiac group and the non-celiac gluten sensitive, as would be expected, but there was also a small increase in permeability in the normal group. So no one is free of the potential effects of gluten. And I think part of the problem is that we've hybridized the wheat plant to have more gluten than it ever did historically. You know, so we've evolved the genetics of the wheat plant much faster than our own genetics can evolve to be able to accommodate this level of gluten. It's 30 to 50% more gluten than it ever had, but we don't have the digestive power to break down that gluten protein, the gliadin. Because if we did, we don't react to amino acids. If we could go in and cut that protein up into its component amino acids, we would be fine. The problem is that the way the protein is folded, it's very difficult for our enzymes to get in there and break it up easily. So if you're being overexposed to gluten over time, you can develop celiac disease even later in life. And I had a patient who was 52 years old, a 52-year-old woman who I diagnosed with celiac disease. And she possibly had been developing it for years, but didn't know. And she also had thyroid disease, Hashimoto's, which is related to gluten and gluten sensitivity. So gluten becomes a big factor for all age groups. And we see it as one of the foods that commonly becomes problematic for children with autism or autism spectrum disorders. So that's basically, in a nutshell, why gluten is so problematic. And it's not a fad. It really is a problem. It's now proven by science. So anyone who thinks it's a fad, it isn't. The danger is getting into the gluten-free world, and doing a lot of substitution, because then you can start taking in a lot of refined carbohydrates, so you get into the sugar problem, right? So the second question that you asked was about slowing down. And so one thing I like to say is that digestion is a relaxed activity. So if you're at your desk and you're on your computer and you're just eating really fast, like you think your digestive system can absorb those nutrients, you're in a fight or flight response. Like your body isn't designed to digest properly. And in fact, I see patients where when they're under stress, their ability to digest protein is reduced. The amount of stomach acid they produce is not as strong. So they have trouble breaking down protein. So it's so important for the digestive system to take that break, take that moment to socialize even. I mean, that's why the ritual of breaking bread is one of the oldest human rituals. And part of that was sitting down together and people shared stories. And that goes back through the ages, probably all the way to the caveman days. That's one of the oldest rituals that has evolved. And these rituals evolved for a reason, because in that shared experience, you're promoting health. You're promoting your own health. So slowing down is such a key also, I think, in our over technology world, as a technologized world, as you say, where not only are we consuming food, but we're consuming so much technology. And what happens when we consume food, and if you don't go to the bathroom and poop, you start not feeling so good after a while. You start becoming toxic. But we don't think, well, do we need to like cleanse ourselves of this information overload? Maybe sometimes you need to step away from the internet and go for a walk in nature and just be present and not think too much. You know, we need more of that in our society. And that slowing down is part of it. It's part of the philosophy that creates a happier digestive system. Happy gut. Creates a happy gut.
AKA happy gut. So I know we're at time here, but I wanted to say thank you so much for being here. I can feel that we have barely scratched the surface of your expertise and the knowledge that you have to share with all of us. And that's why I'm thrilled that you're going to be with us at HCI Live in Miami, the 18th through the 20th. And I'm also thrilled that you're teaching our students in advanced nutrition for health coaches, because we don't, I think health coaches still have a sort of ugly stepchild mentality. But health coaching is a profession that's kind of coming into its own, because this habit change is so important, and helping someone get off gluten and helping someone figure out how the hell to slow down in their day so they can eat. It makes a huge difference in people's lives. So thank you so much. We can't wait to see you in Miami in just a couple of weeks. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can't wait to be there.